Hi, welcome to Holding Space. I'm Caleb Mayo, and this is my brother John Mayo.
Hello.
And UFOs are real, so we talk about thoughts and feelings around that subject. And today we're going to do something kind of big and hairy and exciting, which is explore scenarios for what the heck is going on. This is a very big topic. It's something that we in the community kind of tend to avoid, I think, because it's so thorny and unknowable, and because the only sort of like rational approach to this whole situation is radical. What do you call it? Radical
Agnosticism.
agnosticism, right? Where you don't decide what's going on. So we're not necessarily going to say what we think is definitely happening. In fact, we don't think anybody could, but we're going to rate some likelihoods of potential things that might be going on with the phenomenon. And we're going to take a walk from the worst possible news to the best possible news, and see what we feel might be more likely, and just explore what some of those ideas imply. Did you want
And I
to
guess,
say something
yeah,
starting
we'll
off?
see if we can convince ourselves of any of these scenarios, which I expect that we can't, I guess. And I guess my kind of ground level, throat clearing here is that I think it's highly unlikely that we would hit on what's actually happening in our little brainstorm of a dozen scenarios. And I feel like it's more likely that it's a mix of things and a mix of some of the things that we're going to talk about today, probably. And ultimately, just like something pretty complex. It's ultimately probably something messy and weird, maybe weirder than anything we could come up with. Yeah, but I think we got a good list here, and let's just jump into it.
Cool. All right. Yeah. That all seems right to me. And I just want to add that there are elements there that will be mutually compatible between these things. And sometimes that's a little hard to flag when you're categorizing. So if they come up and we notice one, we might be able to call it out as like a potential element of one scenario, which could be compatible with multiple other scenarios in various ways.
Good point. And so we'll assign a 1 to 5 rating on like our gut, how plausible we think it is, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. And
1
on
being
our list,
not very likely, 5 being likely,
yes.
most likely. Okay.
Okay, great. And we've got you going up first with one of the worst case scenarios.
Okay, cool. Blah blah blah. Worst case scenario number 1 is that the aliens have a hand around our throat. I guess that it is the aliens, whatever they are, aliens, Senichi, these entities just have their hand around our throat. That they're way more powerful than us. And I guess what I mean in this scenario is that that some human power structures like governments or militaries are aware of this and like know that we're like horribly outmatched, and that the cover up is a result of trying to like hide this terrible scary fact.
Mm.
I have a couple more thoughts, but what do you think? What's your initial?
Got about the possibility of that? Or, yeah, okay. So, first of all, feels kind of likely because they're so much more technologically advanced than
Mhm.
us. Certainly feels believable that they might be exerting control. Then, also in this column goes the interest in our military infrastructure and activities, which maybe would suggest that they're trying to keep a lid on our capabilities.
Mhm.
Um, if there is a kind of hand around our throat, it seems like it's squeezing sort of gently. They're not like going around blowing up buildings, but at the same time, as we discussed in our "Why Are They Kind of Careful" episode, they're not hiding completely. So they might be sending a subtle message, especially to those in military control. What were your other thoughts about the subject?
Well, I guess this metaphor of a hand around the throat, what it implies is that we are being killed, and just like, slowly. And we'll talk about a similar idea in a little bit. One of the things this makes me think about is that story from the end of one of the Secret Machines books, one of the Tom DeLonge books about the puppies and the gophers or whatever. I
Yeah,
probably
rats and terriers.
yeah, rats and terriers. That's it. I probably shouldn't have brought it up because I now don't know it. But
The farmer hires or buys some terriers to clear out a bunch of rats, and then when the rats are all dead, he kills the terriers. And
right,
it's a creepy proposed metaphor for how NHI, non-human intelligence, might be using human control systems to eliminate resistance, and then when they're done with that, they'll eliminate the control systems, I think, is the idea.
I think that's right. And then the sort of the like button on it or hopeful spin from it is like maybe the farmer thinks we're terriers, but actually we're just puppies, and we're what if we can grow up before the farmer goes to drown us in a sack? So like that also would be part of the an explanation for the cover up here uh, would be that the governments and militaries are like working frantically to try to build up our ability to have any chance in
Yeah.
this fight. And they would, and they're worried that if they're worried that a broader acknowledgement of or acceptance of the phenomena or the presence of NHI might precipitate, fucking mass slaughter and planetary takeover. La
Right.
la la.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, there
Yeah.
is a reason we have selected the worst scenario bucket for this idea.
Yeah. Okay. I think do you want to assign a rating and then move on? We got so many to do.
Fuck, 3 or 4? Shit. I don't know. It seems so compelling when you said that. Um,
Like,
Evidence against includes NHI telling people that they're here to help and we're destroying our planet.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, I guess some evidence against might be that they haven't destroyed any major things yet that we know of. But that's not super strong evidence. How does 3 feel to you?
I guess I don't know. I find that it's so hard to assess because we think of these things in human time scales.
Mm,
And so like to me it would seem like a very very it would seem like so slow as to be not an invasion, not a that they're not trying to kill us because like they could do it so quickly. But
mm.
maybe they are doing it quickly from their perspective. I don't know. I don't find it super likely. I mean, look, I want to sleep at night. I would give it a 2.
Okay, cool. I did want to ping one other idea here, which I think might be worth running through the thread, which is that we could think about like what this might imply for where we're going. And one thing I think this scenario might imply for where we're going is that they might destroy advanced space capacity if we get to that point. Like,
Mhm.
so far, Starship hasn't successfully taken off, but maybe if it did, if we started routinely going to the moon and Mars, maybe they would fuck with that, or like maybe they wouldn't bother until we started like building a Dyson sphere or something. But
Yeah.
down the road, if they do have a hand around our throat, we would expect them, I think, to limit our military development in some important way. So
Mhm.
keep an eye on the skies for that. Yeah, I kind of agree with you that it's not super duper likely, but I'm not sure. I definitely don't think it's a 1. I think it's like believable enough
Yeah. Should we
to be a
call it a
2.
3? Look,
Why?
we're here to, just speculate rampantly and just shoot from the hip and make some shit up. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, all right. Given the messages of love and hope, let's leave it at a 2 and presume they're not deceiving us,
Yeah, mixed
intent to
bag also. I
destroy.
mean, it's it seems like it's probably more than one entity that's messing around here. Um,
Right.
so it's possible that we're dealing with different power structures, moral imperatives, agendas.
Totally.
Do you want to skip to your number 4 because it's kind of similar, or do you want to go in this order?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So a companion scenario to this is the slow secret invasion hypothesis. Um, I think I think what's his name that we really like, who's been writing these books. Oh my god, I'm blanking on
Garrett
his name.
Graff?
We don't love Mr. Graff.
Oh,
Let's just
Dolan. Richard
Dolan.
Dolan.
Yeah, Richard Dolan had a pretty good frame on this, which sort of seems obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. If like humanity were exploring the stars and we came upon a planet that was beautiful and habitable and filled with diverse life, but it was controlled by a barbaric species that was destroying its environment and killing itself and each other, how would you approach that species? How would you think about them with regard to their planet? And what would you think of as your moral imperative in that situation?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
first, get a bunch of cow anuses.
Okay, good point. That's super weird. But
Yeah.
what if you get those cow anuses in order to build your avatar technology so that you can interface with this population, build some like human looking creatures that you can send down to be like, hello, fellow humans, I will fund this real estate development, or run for Congress, or write a book about the UFO security state, or whatever. Not implying anything. Garrett Graff looks slightly like an alien to me.
You heard it here first, folks. Our listeners going to love that.
So the idea there would be that the aliens are among us. And again, this is like
my God, dude.
in the worst case scenarios for a reason. It seems super kooky, but apparently human seeming NHI are among the highest in frequency of sightings during UFO events. So people report seeing short and tall grays at about as much or more in total than human seeming NHI. But if you break out the short and tall grays, then actually the thing people report seeing most is human-like visitors, which sort of suggests that some of these folks might be able to blend in pretty well. And we've heard some cool, weird stories about Men in Black type characters. They're usually like twins, and they like roll up in suits and they ask super weird questions and they blink strangely, or they don't blink. So fucking weird. And maybe we'll like explore this another time. But just to put a side pin in that, there are two different ideas of Men in Black. One comes from our like movies and comics, which is like American or human anyway entities who walk around in suits controlling the alien situation. But there's another alien focused idea of Men in Black, which is that NHI walk around posing as humans in suits and sort of acting like they're from some kind of authoritative agency. So anyway, those guys look like human. The Italians in the pancake story from Maconia look like humans. Of some people, you just shared one this week with somebody who saw like 7 to 9 foot tall humans, like the Nordic types all seem.
Even the Betty and Barney Hill is like humans, but with big eyes.
Really?
Even I feel like the school in Zimbabwe is also humanoid or humans but big eyes.
Wow. Well, that's kind of interesting. So what all that adds up to is a possibility that there might be some very slow campaign to infiltrate human society and maybe steer it toward a positive outcome for the NHI.
Okay, cool. All right. I feel like I chimed in with a bunch of stupid shit while you were talking about that, and I regret doing that because I think it's a very interesting and actually like pretty simple, sharp idea. So it's like they are taking over the planet. They're just it's like a boiling a frog kind of scenario.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a slow motion planetary takeover that we're like never even going to notice is happening, or we're not going to notice until
And instead of a military confrontation, it would just be like replacement theory, basically.
Oh, man, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting idea. I wonder, connecting this to the idea from Whitley Strieber that we talked about recently, that he said that they told him that they want us to grow up and like be part of their, and like be their buddies. They don't want us to become obsessed with them. Maybe there's like a, maybe by doing it very slowly like this, that doing an invasion this slowly and gradually enables them to like assimilate our culture and humanity into their like superstructure culture
Mm, mm.
without us having this like shock moment that like breaks our cultural identity and instead keeps us a lot, keeps it, persisting in some way while also being agglomerated into their culture.
That is fascinating. And what it made me think of was the Roman Empire, but also other
Um,
historic human behavior, like the Hittites, I think, did this. They
huh.
would take over a place, but they would bring the statues of that place's gods to their home temple and like worship those gods and just like incorporate the culture into their own.
Mhm.
And actually, to that point, maybe the idea or part of the idea behind a secret invasion would be that you don't need to convert every single person. You just need to get enough impact on the culture to direct it toward the positive end that you're going for. There's also a slightly more benign version of this where they are like infiltrating and living among humans, but they're not necessarily trying to take over. They're just like here because they like living here, and they're like immigrating relatively benignly.
Hmm.
That's probably enough. Um, I because this is such a crazy idea, I sort of feel like we should have throat cleared even more at the beginning to say, obviously, we're experimenting with some of the wildest, farthest out there theories,
Yeah.
and that's like part of why this doesn't happen very much. People talk about it quickly and they move on because it's like embarrassing to address these ideas as if they were potentially real things that are going on.
Yeah.
And
We
I'm
sound crazy.
yeah, right. And to that point, I mentioned to you privately that this is getting into the territory that makes you feel like you might get radically alienated from society if you really believe this. And if you weren't careful psychologically, you could end up in a place where you like don't trust anybody around you and like think the reality structures that the media is presenting to you are all fake and that like no
Yeah.
one can be trusted. And that's like a pretty dangerous psychological stew in which to simmer. So we want to kind of like take this carefully for what it's worth, but we don't want to rule out some of the potential crazy implications of, some pretty crazy reporting that we're hearing and reading from work that's been done over many decades.
Yeah. But
So you're thinking
yeah.
3 or 4? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think yes, let's give a fuck 4. Jesus, really? To a slow
All right,
like,
let's say 3. I don't know. I,
yeah.
I actually found myself feeling a little more uh, convinced by the idea that they might be incorporating themselves into our culture without necessarily feeling like they needed to drive it.
Yeah. I guess sorry, I'm just thinking of your throat clearing there and uh
Go ahead,
I just want
please.
to
Cough
add
up a
that
storm.
like yeah, we're entering this space to talk about this crazy stuff, holding on very lightly to all of these ideas and like with a I think we both have like read enough, listened enough, done enough research in this space to be like confident enough about confident about enough about the evidence that exists, but also like comfortable enough to say like we have no fucking idea ultimately, and like, but there's something going on here, and and it's very interesting to talk about. So so let's just do it. And like I don't know, to any future employers, I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
we're sorry and we're not crazy.
but yeah, it
Do you
is
want to?
uncomfortable to talk about this, but we're not proselytizing. We're not trying to I don't know. It does like, yeah, I've been thinking about Pizzagate this week and like
Mm,
it is just so important to I've never been somebody who's been like had this kind of mindset of like the government's lying to us all the time and it's this all these conspiracy theories and like that's not my natural position. It's like pretty uncomfortable for me to be in this place and also like I care a lot about media literacy and like media criticism and like critical thinking and so like it's very important for us to pause and check ourselves constantly on this kind of stuff.
thank you.
Ugh, all right,
Wait,
that's like yeah. Sorry, go please.
this one implication that this has might be a good transition into either of these next two scenarios, which is that if there are non-human beings living in human bodies or living among us and passing for human, that would potentially have implications for the cover-up, which might include that some beings involved in the cover-up might be non-human. And that's something, again, that you just sort of like want not to be true, so you'd like to intuitively rate it low. It's kind of hard to imagine that like an alien could successfully run for Congress. But maybe if
Yeah.
they've been here for a really long time, or if they're inhabiting a body in some shared way, or they've been inhabiting a human body for its whole lifetime, maybe it's possible. I don't know, way out in the weeds here. But would you like to use that as a jumping off point to transition into one of these other two? You could pick whichever
Sure.
one.
Okay. I guess I'm going to do number 3 now, because it frankly is just not that interesting to me. But the next worst case scenario, your number 3, is that that we're like a farmed product in some way, that there's something that human beings are producing without our knowledge, that the aliens like and want. Some people talk about this as like they harvest fear. I don't know, or it doesn't have to be that. It could be positive emotions also.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, but
this
we're
word loosh has been popping up this week in our research. Like, it's LOOSH is a word that people use to refer to like the positive feelings that human emotions generate, like a higher energy of love. And
hmm,
the pitch there is like maybe human society generates these emotions, and then some other kind of being can harvest them, like we harvest honey from bees.
the bees metaphor is good. We're very busy. We're working on our stuff, and then I don't know. I kind of figure bees notice when their honey goes missing, but maybe not, I guess. And also they don't live very long, so there's not a lot of like institutional memory in a beehive.
Yeah,
Um,
true. Which kind of pings your point about the potential long time scale here.
yeah. Um, okay. I don't have much else to say about this one. I just really don't like it, I guess.
Is there anything else they could be farming, like carbon dioxide or something that we produce a lot of that could just be useful for them?
Hmm.
That's maybe not crazy. They don't seem to have told people things like this, but some people have, like a fair amount of contactees have reported some version of like a sexual encounter, that
Yes.
there was like some kind of extraction of sperm or possibly eggs, or there's like impregnation, or some people have been like, they've had memories of seeing like human embryos in stasis, or like
Hmm.
parents have been like alleged parents have been like abducted to spend time with possible hybrid children. This sounds sort of crazy, but like the gardening bear, that idea would be that they're like extracting human genetic material for some kind of
Hmm.
uh, growth purposes. Like maybe they're building a clone army, or maybe they're just like doing what we do when we extract genetic material from animals and like preserving their bloodlines, or maybe they're like genetically experimenting and mixing and combining. And I guess I would say that the fact that those reports exist, even though they do sound crazy, is some kind of evidence for the like creepy garden
And
hypothesis.
there's a lot of, to be clear, there are like a lot of reports of some kind of sexual component in abduction stories, right? Like that's a
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
consistent piece of abduction narratives.
Yeah, we don't have a number to throw out, but
Yeah.
it's like not one or two. And that is I would say one of the more shocking things that I've discovered learning about this space. That it's like I always assumed it was like one or two just completely made up stories by the National Enquirer, but it
Mhm.
turns out it's like hundreds or thousands of people who have had some kind of sexual experience. That starts to seem like something, at least scientific, if not extractive necessarily.
What can we file alongside this creepy garden idea? Well, okay. I do think what we're talking about, there is a version of the garden idea that is positive or benign, which is like that they're like trying to preserve our species, like the rhinos with missing time because we're trying to save the white rhino that we've
Mhm.
talked about before. Uh, but this is not that. This is them doing it because they want something from us or they enjoy doing this in some way and are ultimately disinterested really in the human experience on Earth and like the persistence of humans on Earth. They don't really give a shit. They just want they just want our whatever, you know.
Okay, I think that's an important clarification. So we're not mixing this with this being like a benevolent zoo hypothesis. This is
Yeah.
just like purely extractive. They're
Oh,
mining humans in some way.
yeah. Okay. And I think something that could be filed alongside this that is and I think about it a lot now since I've gotten into this space is that South Park episode where they go to space and it turns out that Earth is just a TV show.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and they're like,
Earth is
like,
being canceled, and they have to save Earth.
oh yeah, right. But the producers at some point are like, "You think this is how it's supposed to work? Bears, ducks, and Iraqis living on one planet together? No, that's ridiculous. There's one planet for the bears, one planet for the ducks, one for the Asians." You know. So
Yeah,
like yeah, so this bad case scenario would be that yeah, we're a TV show or a fucking like galactic MMA fight, and they just like put us in a put them in a box and shake it up. And again, like they take the super long time scale, and maybe this is like a channel that they flip through, or swipe through.
yeah. That kind of connects to some of the more benevolent ideas we'll cover at the bottom, which include things like tourism. Like maybe
Yeah.
they're watching some fun shit happen here. I also wanted to draw one more distinction, which is it's possible that Creepy Garden goes all the way back to like starting a garden, like seeding life on this planet or seeding humans on this planet. But it's also possible that like the planet has evolved naturally and they're like gardening in the sense that we like harvest wildflowers. Like they are finding interesting things here and extracting that, but didn't necessarily plant those interesting things. So that's a potential
Mm,
branch of this idea.
mm.
Two or three? How does that sound to you?
Yeah. Let's go to or
Okay. Oh, cool. All right. So the last one in our worst case scenarios is a dark arrangement.
dun, dun, dun.
This idea would be that I think some people call it a breakaway civilization, that like some humans are working with some non-human intelligence and they have elevated that collaboration to the level of significant attempts at control, and maybe they have their own kind of like technological universe, and some people then deploy this idea of like mass mind control in this area. So the basic idea is that some humans are working with some non-human intelligence and that they have like a deep state that can act on the world in whatever way it wants and it is not accountable to world governments. So this kind
Mm,
of leads to some dark, creepy places like, Illuminati, world control, New World Order. Something secret is going on that is like highly controlling in a human way,
mm,
but combines human malevolent aggression with non-human technology and like spiritual control. Obviously, very, very creepy. Um, I tend to rate this, I think, lowest of the four. Um, Maybe because I, in part, have a little more faith in humanity. It also sounds extremely complicated to me. A lot of ins
mm,
and outs. A lot of ways this could be revealed. So my sort of gut instinct is like a two. I
mhm,
also think humans are driven by status in a way that I'm not sure this kind of covers. Like if you were a secret New World Order chieftain, what would you be getting out of that situation? Would you feel satisfied sufficiently by like mind control pyramids underground in Alaska? Or do you need the status of like public recognition for your
mm.
fame and good works and wealth? I'm not sure it jibes for me with what we know about human instincts. Does any of that bounce off interestingly for you?
Honestly, I think you covered it well, and I think we should just move on because we got a lot left to talk about. I don't have anything to add. I think you summed it up nicely.
Okay, I guess I would just say that there's like one story about a person being involved in a battle in like underground tunnels with lizard people and
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking about Agua Dulce,
okay.
right? We're talking about the Agua Dulce base, right? And in which is a research facility in California. Let's see. Yeah, allegedly a secret underground base, and I would just say New Mexico. Um, yeah, so this is one of the sites, supposed sites of I think this has been floated as a like collaborative laboratory environment between humans and NHI.
Okay.
And yeah, and supposedly, who's the guy who said that there was like a fight under? I mean, there's been there's been a lot of UFO sightings in this area, right? Okay, and then Paul Benowitz. Oh no, that's not him. That's the guy who killed himself. I don't know. John Lear's in the mix here. I don't. I guess I don't have enough to really tell you about this. I mean, I don't. I also
Yeah.
don't want to like go down a whole side column here about like the laser gun fight and that supposedly happened at
Right.
Albuquerque.
Yeah, I don't really either, but I want to ping it as a point in this column that like
Yeah.
stories like that would point toward ideas like this. And I want to do one sort of like philosophical debunking of an idea that we hear a lot in this space, which is the concept of mass mind control. And I want to flag this as something that could be compatible with some of our other scenarios. But I've heard several people float this idea, at least one of whom was like a semi-serious person. And I just want to not exactly push back, but I want to point out that I think the idea of mass mind control in a complex way seems like a really big speculation. And it's the reason I think that is that it's intuitively believable that you might have some kind of psychographic tool that could help people feel better or make people feel worse. And we have some evidence from encounter stories that people have been calmed down by these creatures, or that there's one on Skinwalker Ranch where people are like made so afraid that they can't approach a certain object. So it seems like possible that there's some like emotional control technology out there. But what seems like a leap to me is that some people go from that idea to the idea that you could mass control people's interest in a particular subject or people's behavior in some like pretty granular way, which just even taking the first part of the technology as believable seems like a stretch to me, because you would have to manipulate people's emotions so specifically that you could say like make them disinterested in the UFO phenomenon, or make them more likely to ignore strange sightings in their life, make them less curious,
Yeah.
make them more angry. Like more angry is believable, but like specifically more likely to vote Republican or something would be like
Yeah.
really hard, I think. So the general mind control idea to me feels unlikely, and it does come up. I could see a version where they're just manipulating emotions en masse, but manipulating people to do specific things, think specific things, feels specific complicated ways, that feels very unlikely to me, and I think it's reasonable for it to feel unlikely. But I'm also sort of talking myself into this because I want it to be true. I just wanted to lay that out because it comes up here.
Okay, well, I was just talking about this morning with friends, and a friend of mine punctured this idea very quickly for me in a way that so I think in a nutshell, like what this scenario proposes is that everybody's being mind controlled, but not me, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the like conspiracy theorist fallacy of like Everybody is being brainwashed, but I see through it. So, like, if this were really the case, ufology would not be a field.
Mhm.
David Grush would not be testifying before Congress. Like,
We wouldn't be recording this right
we
now.
would be under control. So, like, I put a big asterisk next to this idea, or like a big thumbs
Mhm.
down, I guess,
Yeah.
next to this idea, because I think that it is like self-aggrandizing and delusional, and like not necessary to explain disinterest in this topic. Like, I think the like stigma is extremely strong, and like human beings have a very strong biological instinct to fit in with their tribe. We're tribal creatures, and we don't want to get kicked out and go like die in the dark alone. So like, and that's been then stoked by by people trying to propagate, trying to keep us in the dark about this, or don't want us to talk about it. And you don't even need super dark reasons for that. It could just be like, because this is unexplained, and that makes the military look powerless, and then arguably the concept of nations would just kind of crumble if we had blah blah blah. So yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it's actually a particularly important idea to like to flag as as yeah, as like conspiracy theorizing in the bad way, and self-aggrandizing, and yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Thank you for doing that rundown. I want to add one more pedestrian point of data to this, which is that uh, people often, in just like totally normal polls about regular human stuff, will estimate that other people are like having a worse time than they are. So if you ask people about the economy, they might say, "Yeah, I'm doing fine, but I think the economy in general is bad for other people."
Hmm.
Or like, "I don't feel threatened by crime in my community, but I think in general people feel threatened by crime in their community." And you can see this heightens as groups get more skeptical of each other. So like Democrats estimate worse things about Republicans, and Republicans estimate worse things about Democrats. And the general implication is like, we're not great at estimating how other groups feel, and we tend to sort of assume negatively about them. So like the way that would play into this mind control idea is that like, I don't personally feel mind control, but I can see how mind control might be playing out in society. It's just kind of an easy, natural leap to make, and it's the kind of thing that humans already do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that completes our tour of the worst case scenarios. We're looking at like 1/2 for dark arrangement,
Yeah.
um, 2/3 for hand around our throat, 2/3 for some kind of creepy garden, and 3/4 for slow invasion, hybrids, illusions.
Okay. Jesus.
Moving on to some neutral cases.
Yeah.
Should we lighten the room up a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start this one. We're part of a longer chain of cosmic history, and our ancestors intentionally cultivated our species to keep our kind alive. This idea would be that some humanoid things have existed for a very, very long time, like maybe 1 million years ago on Mars, and that some aspect of that race has been like seeding itself throughout the galaxy or galaxies to continue its bloodlines in some ways. And that could mean either starting life entirely on a planet, or it could mean interfering as that life develops to advance it and like uplift parts of it, and then kind of fit in with its own genetic material. It'd be kind of like a meta macro reproduction tactic that like instead of
Mm.
directly reproducing, you insert your genetic material into other like natural beings that are evolving on their own, and so you kind of keep your bloodline alive. That's pretty wild, but it's not necessarily malevolent. It's not necessarily benevolent either, though. It's just the idea would be like a cosmic long-term reproduction, and we're one link in that chain. How does that bounce for you?
I mean, yeah, I like this as a middle ground, as like a neutral case. Yeah, neutral, trending, hopeful, I guess, because it doesn't assume that we're um under attack. I guess I don't feel like it explains the all the different all it doesn't explain the variety of encounters. Um like this sort of explains the, like why are some people seeing like mantises or lizards or the little blue hairy guys, um
Mm.
this is sort of almost like beside the question of the phenomenon.
Yeah,
um
you're right. You're right. It wouldn't explain the diversity. It might explain. It might still be true. It might
yeah,
explain us. Um,
if we believe believe that people who say that they're seeing human beings, basically, like in 50% of these cases where we're seeing, where people are having encounters, um, then I think that this becomes a fairly likely scenario, I guess. Um, and I do believe, I don't know, we believe experiencers here on the Holding Space show. Um,
yes, we do.
so so that kind of leads me to kind of leads me to put like a pretty high degree of plausibility in this scenario. And then throw in the shit about like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's rumors of structures on the moon. I think there's rumors of that on Mars too, but I haven't
Mhm.
seen anything super persuasive. I mean, I haven't seen anything super persuasive about either of those things, but there's like kind of a lot of smoke, specifically with the moon, people talking about that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and then the general idea that like human civilization is way older than we are, have been taught in our 20th century conceptions.
Yeah, that I
Um,
think is pretty believable.
I think that's pretty believable, and that lends, I think, to me, lends credence to this idea. Maybe not in the specific that like there's a direct connection there between old humans and space humans, but like that there's like quite a lot of evidence to suggest that like we have a pretty radically wrong conception of how old civilization is. And so if we could be that wrong about that, then why not just put it up on a larger time scale and we can be even more wrong about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It also points to this thing that I think people underestimate, which is how fast things disappear, and that like over not that long, a couple 100,000 years, like all evidence of a civilization can be wiped out. It's hard to square that with like super advanced materials for
Yeah.
me sometimes. Like if they're, these things that they're flying around Earth right now seem like really, it seems like they seem like they might last longer than rocks, I guess is my feeling. So
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe the holy grail for material science would be that everything's biodegradable.
yeah, yeah, well, that's a good point. I guess I also wanted to flag a different way in which this could be falsified, which is that it could be the case that humanoid features are uh, subject to convergent evolution and that
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
just very convenient.
That is a very interesting idea.
So the evidence for this in our own biological study on Earth is that we think crabs have evolved on planet Earth like 8 different times, like independently of each other. Crabs have evolved in different places, not from the same bloodlines, but they've converged on the form factor of crab because it's such a useful, convenient structure for some reason to just like navigate their particular environments. And so the idea would be if crabs can evolve like 8 times just on this planet, then maybe human-like things could evolve millions of times in the hundreds of billions of habitable planets around our galaxy, and trillions in the universe beyond. So maybe you don't need uh, it's kind of like a cosmic reproduction seeding program to get to humanoid outcomes, because humanoid outcomes are convergently likely. That would be the idea there.
That's a very fun idea. I think we should probably move on to another topic. But if anybody's
Okay.
interested in, or if you, since you're the only one listening to me, Caleb, if you're interested in learning more about this, there's this book that I
Yeah.
haven't read, but is on my list called The Zoologist's Guide to the Galaxy: What Animals on Earth Reveal About Aliens and Ourselves by Dr. Eric Kirschenbaum. He's a lecturer at University of Cambridge. And he's a zoologist, and yeah, and he's written this book. I think basically arguing for convergent evolution, and saying that it's not crazy that aliens might naturally resemble us.
Cool. All right. Thank you for that. All right. Would you like to do the next neutral case?
Sure. Yes. Okay. The next one. Okay. The next one is that. Okay. This is I'll do this one. Sorry, helicopter. I'll do this one. I'm gonna do number 4 because I think it's actually sort of a bad case scenario, which is that the aliens are in a Cold War, and there's a lot of distrust and tension between the entities. So this scenario would be almost a like companion piece to the idea that there's some set of rules that the NHI have agreed to follow while visiting Earth. And this one, but in this scenario, it would presume that there's like this sort of invisible agreement between them all because they're worried about stepping on each other's toes or yeah, getting in a fight. That they would like probably maybe in a perfect world like to have our planet. Or I don't know. I mean, that's not even necessary. But the idea that they're like some fear of each other that's kind of keeping their behavior somewhat in check.
Yeah, I would say this seems kind of likely because of the different form factors, and because we have some reports, we've sort of sketchy reports about the less humanoid looking aliens or NHI, but we don't have a ton of them together. So I think we have a fair amount of grays with humanoids, and we have some like grays with mantids. And I think we have some reptiles with humanoids, but I don't think we have any reptiles with mantids or reptiles with grays. So I know it's sort of
God.
that sort of suggests that there's not like a high council of these organisms that work together seamlessly and harmoniously. It could be. I don't know. It at least sort of is some evidence in the column that there potentially being tension.
Do we talk about Nuremberg here? Do we talk about the 1561 celestial phenomenon over Nuremberg?
Oh, perfect thing to talk about here. Lay
really
it out.
Quickly. Yeah, really quickly, and I'm going to do the horrible podcast show thing that I hate, which is a white guy reading a Wikipedia page. But
the best.
Yeah, in 1561 in the morning, someday, there's this amazing broadsheet. Just search 1561 celestial phenomena or 1651 Nuremberg celestial phenomenon.
We'll put the link.
Basically, people woke up and went outside and saw a like spaceship fight happening in the sky over their town. There's like hundreds of people saw it, and then there's this broadsheet with a drawing and a like news report essentially that somebody wrote up about it, and it's fucking crazy. And it's also the descriptions of the ships are so weird. It's like cylinders shooting out spheres, and then the spheres are shooting each other and melting and burning up. There's a giant triangle. It's really crazy stuff. But anyways, I don't know. Maybe there are other, I'm sure there are that I'm not aware of, examples of this. This is for sure the most dramatic one I've ever heard of, but like that suggests that there is tension between some of these visitors.
Yeah, it sounds like a fight, basically, is the short version of what Nuremberg sounds like. It sounds like ships are fighting each other, and some of them like go down in smoking heaps. And you know, the closest thing people have pitched to this is like it was a solar flare event, but that just seems really radically at odds with
it's a
the drawing
ridiculous explanation for the text of this broadsheet.
Yeah, so natural explanations don't seem super believable. Of course, the description of the thing happening is also crazy. It's a mass sighting event. Side note, my favorite part about that broadsheet is that it ends with a paragraph of somebody saying this clearly is happening because we all have not repented enough, and you have to apologize to God and be very sorry so more things like this won't happen.
So I guess just to connect this to the question we're on today, which is, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, neutral. What would make this a neutral case scenario is that they're, I don't know, more concerned with each other than, I guess, I don't know. Yeah, that it's that there's some tension that's keeping them from really fucking our shit up, I guess.
Yeah. And that it's not necessarily about us in a central way. It could be a bad scenario for us.
It could.
There's a reason it's not a best case scenario,
Yeah.
because we get caught in the crossfire. They might be manipulating us in different ways. Various factors and factions might be doing various good or bad things to and with us.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them have teamed up with us. Maybe some of them are harvesting stuff from us. You know, it could. This is a mess, this one, but that's why it's neutral, because we don't necessarily know which way it leads.
Can we just do a quick sidebar here?
Yeah.
This conversation that we're having right now, I don't think I have felt more like vulnerable or ridiculous on this show about this. Like, this is we're just like so out in the weeds, and I'm proud of us for doing it, and it's fun, and I like having these conversations, but also like I feel freaked out about putting my name on this on the internet.
Yeah. I feel the same way.
This is the most vulnerable and freaked out I think that I felt in having one of these conversations. We're really out there talking about very strange ideas, and like, you know, really like sticking our hands in some messy, strange, confusing ideas that honestly sound crazy. Like, they sound crazy. Like, I think that I sound crazy saying these things. And also, you know, I'm glad we're doing it, and I'm proud of doing it. But like, I don't know, this is uncomfortable. I'm kind of having a moment with it. How are you feeling?
I feel the same, and thank you for saying that, because I think it's one of the more interesting and challenging aspects of talking about UFOs in general, is this like profound feeling of insecurity for exploring not just the unknown, but like the really weird. And I think it's totally valid to bring that up. And I think if you, as a viewer or listener, are experiencing something like this, then I think it's totally valid for you to live in that discomfort. And we would encourage you not to come down too hard in any one of these directions, but we also endorse holding space for these wild ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Thank
Okay.
you for that sidebar.
Thanks for that.
Do you have? Thank you. Do you have a likelihood rating for Cold War?
I think this is like fairly likely. I think there's some evidence that there's tension between these critters. I don't know, but I guess not that much. I guess I really can't name very much. So I guess I have to give it a 2.
3 over 4, 2 over
3.
2 over 3.
Does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been, because this is such a weird woolly area, I've been kind of splitting these up and having it be fine with us having multiple numbers for slightly different variants. So you want to say the less likely version is like that it's like a brutal ongoing battle, and the more likely version is that there's like slight tension and lack of overall agreement. Does that sound believable? That it's like less likely that there's like an ancient Montagues, Capulets, lizard people versus mantis war, and it's more likely that just like there's ongoing slight tension between various different organizations who don't necessarily answer to a federation.
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's 2 over 3. So I'm going to do the next one.
Great.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
This one is super weird also. And it's that past lives are real and souls can move fluidly across the universe. So many of us have lived as aliens and vice versa. I kind of want to get out of this one as soon as possible also, because I'm scared of it and blushing. I've been doing some reading about the Monroe Institute recently, and specifically this book, Far Journeys by Robert Monroe. It's really interesting. And I guess we'll leave a note about that. Yeah, this is neutral because it would suggest that we're a mixed bag, that the beings on Earth right now are not necessarily all historically from Earth, that some of us might be from other places, but not here in any invasion capacity, just here because souls move around the ether of consciousness and live in different places and experience different kinds of life. There are people on Earth who call themselves star seeds who feel this way about their own experience, like pretty strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making a face. I make similar faces when I hear this stuff, but I also want to validate people's experience in the same way that I would
Yeah.
validate an experience or a contactee. And
The thing is, I think that there are people who like really think that about themselves. And I'm thinking specifically in one episode of Encounters, I think the Japan episode, there's a Japanese woman in that who like
mm,
is convinced that she's a like reincarnated alien.
mm,
But then I think that there are also just like TikTok influencers or like astrology
uh-huh,
like influencers who
uh-huh.
just like call themselves star seeds. Um,
Yes. And I
and I
would
think,
always say
yeah.
something I always run into in this area as a person who's trying to make his life in the creative arts is that you can get swept away by creative imagination, and it's like a big part of what you do as a creator is like going to these like streams of flow where you just like imagine things and let them flow through you, and that's really beautiful and really exciting. It's one of the coolest parts of art, but it also has always made me skeptical of people who claim to be channeling, because I recognize that kind of channeling behavior in my acting. Like that's like what I do when I act.
Mm,
It's like try to like channel a character and sometimes like technically control it, but sometimes like allow it to emerge is like what feels the best. And so there's a tiny eyebrow raise from me sometimes about people who are experiencing things like that makes me ask, are you really experiencing it, or are you channeling like a beautiful imaginary experience and just like sharing something that feels intuitively real? But that said, there are a couple of examples of people who have like described similar things from different mediums, like different star seeds who have both described a planet with purple trees and silvery flowing water.
mhm.
And when you get to evidence like that, it kind of makes you think that the whole thing might not be made up. So it could
Yeah.
totally be the case that some people really are just like experiencing flights of fancy, and other people actually are delivering some real information about the universe. And it's extremely difficult to peel those two things apart. But it might not be the smartest move to just write off all of this evidence as if it were all just fantasy.
So okay, so bring it back for us here. Let's land this one and just connect it to for me to the phenomenon, to like the observed phenomena, and
Mm.
why we have this as a neutral case.
Okay, yeah, good idea. So the intuitive answer, I'll try to shoot this from the hip, is that like aliens are real in this scenario, and beings actually do live in lots of different places in the universe, and some of them are incarnated here, and some humans are incarnated in those
Mm.
places. But also, technological space travel is real, and these souls can move between the planets and star systems and galaxies maybe, but also so can spaceships. And so they may be visiting us here in the same way that we might visit them someday with
Mm.
sufficient technological advancement. um, and then it just sort of doesn't say anything about intention, this idea.
So it sort of
uh,
suggests that like we're all part of one big family, and that we're maybe we're like one of the undiscovered tribes, and we just don't know that we're part of this big family. And it's
yeah.
benign because it implies that like they're, they don't want to mess us up or steal us because we're steal our stuff because we're part of them and they're part of us, and we just kind of can't see that from our narrow parochial 21st century mindset.
Yes, possibly, but I would also say it is compatible with some other darker theories, which is why we've got it in the neutral basket instead of
Yeah.
the best case scenario basket. It could be compatible with versions of the universe that are like quite loving and supportive and instructive, but it could also be compatible with a version of the universe where there are malevolent forces out to control and exploit. So
Mhm.
I think that's why it makes sense to have it in the neutral basket. Maybe past lives are real. Maybe souls move fluidly throughout the cosmos. Maybe a soul that came here from Zeta Reticuli might attract technology from Zeta Reticuli because their technology is advanced enough to like track soul movement or something.
Right.
And that would be why they were visiting. So yeah, I don't know. this seems pretty crazy, but we are starting to run into evidence of past lives being a real thing. Although they tend to happen in more localized places. Like there are like thousands of reported stories of past lives being real, but they're usually like within a few kilometers. So I 2/3 for this, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I guess our likeliness rating is kind of having a hard time with how far out all these ideas
The
are, and
ideas
I
are
think that's
they're
okay.
so crazy, and they're so, we're using the word evidence, and it's like,
Yeah,
there's evidence, but it's all. I mean, I don't know, but again, we don't discount experience or testimony. Like I take it very seriously, and so do you. So we're counting that as evidence. Um, okay, we've been talking for almost an hour already, I think. Do you want to? Should we do this last neutral case scenario? I
definitely.
Okay, all right, cool. Then all right, the final neutral case scenario is that non-human intelligence are a mixed bag. Some of them want to help us, other ones are creepy. Um, I guess this is neutral because they sort of balance each other out. That there's some bad ones and some good ones.
Yeah, and we've kind of covered this idea in other aspects of this discussion, but other parts of this discussion. But this doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily imply a war among the aliens. I guess one thing it would imply is a lack of organizing structure, that they're like not
Hmm.
from a federation, they don't have a regional governor, um, and they are doing different things on Earth and with us. I guess one piece of evidence for this might be that sightings of greys and mantids and reptiles are basically a phenomenon of the last 100 years. That previous to like nuclear testing, what we mostly have in antiquity is like human-like beings. So
Mm.
the Magonia stuff and back into like mythic star people stuff, those beings are mostly described as humanoids, sometimes like large humanoids, but they're not usually like, you don't see, at least we don't have any clear cut like hieroglyphs of a gray alien, like we have spooky looking human creatures in ancient texts and
Hmm.
drawings, but we don't have a ton of like classic alien seeming things.
That is very interesting.
So that sort of suggests that there are at least a couple of different parties at
Yeah.
play. And maybe these humanoid things that have been around for longer are more benevolently inclined toward us than some more recent visitors.
Hmm.
That's possible. There could be some we haven't met yet. That's an
Yeah.
interesting idea. In
Sure.
fact, there almost certainly are, if there are, trillions of populated galaxies and they can somehow get here.
Yeah.
So this, I guess, feels like pretty likely to us that they're a mixed bag.
Yeah.
It's like not a super explanatory idea.
Yeah. Right. But yeah. But I think does seem likely. 3, 4, 4. Yeah. Great. 4. Okay.
Cool. Moving on to happy talk, and we'll round this out with best case scenarios. And yeah, with apologies for going long. I mean, maybe some people are enjoying that, but we might want to dive into some of these more specifically at a future date. But today is a roundup, so we can keep it a little bit lighter. Probably should have said that an hour and 10 minutes ago.
Oh boy. Okay, cool. First best case scenario is the Star Trek case scenario, that there's a galactic federation, that there's like a UN that we're gonna get onboarded to. Um, I guess I don't know. My mind goes a couple places with this. One is like, or it could be like the Contact scenario where they're like telling us that there's this club, but not inviting us yet because we don't have our shit together. Um, and I guess it's maybe useful to split this idea into two things. One is just the like overall idea that there might be some kind of galactic federation, and then two, the question of whether or not humans will be invited to be part of that. This is so fucking ridiculous. I guess I think I think it's more likely that there is some kind of a federation, and less likely that they would want anything to do with us right now,
Mm.
um, given how messy we are.
Yeah, it kind of seems compatible with the kind of careful behavior we were talking about.
Mhm.
Especially the happier versions of that, where they're trying to like draw us out and engage us. Because if they wanted to just study and just extract, they probably could do that a little more secretly. And so the fact that they're not being super secretive implies that either they don't really care what we think, or they're attempting to engage us a little bit more.
Mhm.
And so this version of shiny suits heaven is that they're trying to tease us toward that, but they can't just like give us all the answers, because it might be dangerous to do so, or it wouldn't be maximally productive way to engage with us.
So in Star Trek, they have, I think it's the Prime Directive, right? Isn't that what
Yes,
it is?
that
Okay,
is
so
what it is.
the Prime Directive rule of is it the Galactic Federation or is that Star Wars shit? I don't remember what it's called.
I think Star Trek is galactic. It might be like regional. They don't do much extra galactic stuff. I think that's very rare in Star Trek.
Okay. All right. Well, at any rate, the Prime Directive is to not interfere with a less advanced civilization. Um, and so, I mean, obviously, they would be fucking that up, I guess, because they are up in our business here, and they're stealing our cow anuses and
I
doing
was gonna use
all sorts
those.
of stuff to poor Whitley Strieber.
Yeah, they're definitely not ignoring us.
Yeah,
They're not keeping us in a bubble where they don't interact at all. So if there is a prime directive, it's fuzzier than that. It's like maybe
yeah.
don't go kill them all.
Or there's yeah, right. It's fuzzier, and maybe there's like a line that at which point, if they crossed, then they get in trouble with the.
Yeah, and I guess in this area we could say that there are some crazy reports from some quarters that there are like higher intelligences operating behind the scenes here. That like Dolan makes a really good point that if they have in fact been around here for thousands of years, maybe like tens of thousands of years, that strongly implies that they have a really static, stable form of government. And
Yeah.
that sort of suggests that they might have automated that government in some kind of like AI way, which doesn't seem crazy. And it's not super hard to imagine that humans might want to move in that direction gradually. Like currently we have a relatively messy program of like having a big public fight and picking people. But as we gradually get more and more things into the system, like start with the level of traffic light cameras, but like then graduate to like small claims courts being automated, and then eventually like a lot of local positions might be automated, and like trash collection could be automated. And I don't know why I put that so high up, but
Yeah.
eventually like a lot of functions of Congress could be automated and like maybe voted on in easier ways. Or maybe you could just like reach a point where civilization agrees broadly enough about enough basic things that you get like an AI god type leader or leadership structure that everyone becomes pretty comfortable with. And that could happen over thousands of years, which, to boil the frog, might not even be damagingly noticeable. So it's possible that some of these beings are working for a big high up AI god-like being, which achieved its sentience and power structures millennia ago, and has been controlling them, hopefully benevolently, ever since.
Okay, so to let's just give this a rating. But what we're presuming here when we say Star Trek scenario is that there is a like cooperative group that
Hmm.
is like a polyglot, or no, that's not what that word means. It's like a diverse group of entities, but they're working together and
Hmm.
are friends, and they might have their squabbles, but like ultimately they're part of a larger family of
Yeah.
freakazoids. And yeah.
I would say that some level of understanding is pretty high. Like I would rate that pretty high. That
Mhm.
to your point about maybe having some squabbles, it's possible that this is not like a super ironed out operation, but the idea
Mhm.
that they maybe have rules that they generally respect about each other's authority and power seems pretty believable. That's how human societies work. So I would say maybe four on the Federation, three or
Yeah, I
four.
think
What do
I
you
would
think?
say like 4 for there being some kind of overarching kind of organization or communication that happens between these advanced intelligences,
Okay.
but like a 1 to the idea that they would invite us anytime soon to join them. We're
uh,
messy. Our shit's messy. Although I guess you have to temper that with the fact that a bunch of sightings include apparently humans. So
Yeah, it could be things like us.
so like so like we're already, I guess in that scenario, actually, like we're already in the club. Our species is already in the
Oh
club.
man, that's so hopeful. Yeah, and that we're the undiscovered tribes of Burgundy, but other French people are already in the government. That's
Burgundy.
yeah. I don't know why I always put this in France, but partially it's because of this next explanation, which
Okay.
is that there might be a bunch of tourism going on.
Okay.
And in this benevolent vision, they are not about to invite us into any super club. Maybe that's a few thousand years away, but they might be very interested in what's going on here. And so maybe a lot of the activity is cruises, like maybe a lot of these larger ships that people have reported are cruise ships filled with alien tourists, or tourist beings from other dimensions or far away in the universe or the consciousness cosmos,
Hmm.
and they're just here to check us out. And there's a description in that Far Journeys book about like a tour guide alien presence explaining to other spirits what New York is, and like what those like metal sheaths are that we drive around in, and why we wear
Hmm.
so many colors. Um, and it's possible also that this could interact with that idea of feeding on human emotions, but maybe a little more benevolently. Like instead of harvesting them, they might come to like experience them, like we would experience a sunset or the majesty of a herd of antelope running
Hmm.
across the plains. Any bounce offs here for you? Does
I
this
mean, it's a fun
feel good?
idea. It's a delightful idea. It feels like a Gary Larson cartoon. Uh, I do think there are. You always talk about the really large craft as meaning, and we could do a whole episode, a conversation about that.
Mm, yeah, let's.
Like very large craft suggesting a cruise ship. Um, and I think that's I kind of buy that idea. Um,
Yeah, that one that we described the other day that was like during World War II. This pilot saw like a long row of lights, and everybody in their plane felt super good about it, and then it zapped away. Sounded like a cruise ship to me.
I mean, that's cool if it's like a safari truck that just emanates good vibes, so the ostriches are like totally chill with you looking at them.
Yes, another piece of evidence that I think feels really good for this. It's not exactly evidence, but this is how we behave toward animals. And I think it's not hard to imagine that if humans had the kind of technology that could move around star systems easily and quickly, we would do this. We would absolutely have commercial cruises
Yeah,
to far away space locations to see the like mystical creatures that live there, and just like marvel at their beauty and complexity and how different they are from our home planet. So like that
yeah.
feels, it feels pretty likely to me that some element of the phenomenon is touristy. And I actually feel like so likely that I think that's like a 4/5 for me.
Yeah,
Yeah. What
I'd
do you
buy
think?
that. I would buy that. I would buy that. It doesn't, obviously this one idea doesn't encapsulate all of the sightings, all of the encounters. Um, but but couple this with the fact that we haven't been eradicated, and it suggests a kind of like curiosity, a sweetness almost.
Mm-hmm. You could
A
maybe even
wholesome
squint.
curiosity.
A what?
A wholesome
A
curiosity.
wholesome curiosity. You could possibly squint and imagine that some of the security operations are just are from like the true cruise companies who are just checking that they can defuse our nuclear missiles to guarantee the safety of all their
Hmm.
visiting aliens. Probably not, but those are probably two independent operations. There's like a military organization that is checking out our military and spaceflight capabilities, and then there are cruise operations that are independent. Um, and maybe commercial. I don't know. We had never talked about space money, but seems like it could be a
You,
luxury class.
you know what I like about this idea is the idea that an alien might be like really bored on a cruise while looking at Earth. That like
Mm,
have to be like, put your fucking Game Boy down, Glabnoid, and look out the window.
this is culture,
Yeah.
but they only live for 90 years. Blah.
Okay, so that actually then my comment there kind of can slide us into another best case scenario, which is that they're mildly curious in us. They're curious, but like ultimately they're like, we're not that special. So we don't need to be scared that they're gonna try to control us, that they're
Mm,
gonna try to steal our planet,
mm.
because we're like a cool bauble. We're a fun, shiny object, but ultimately they're not that into us.
Yeah, and it's not that hard to believe that resources from Earth would be plentiful elsewhere in the universe. There,
Hmm.
like hydrogen is quite common, I think. The oxygen is pretty common. Like the rare metals on Earth are like not rare in asteroids. Um, maybe there's the loosh we produce is like rare because there aren't like tons of civilizations with billions of people. Maybe, but yeah, maybe we're pretty normal, and it's not that different from visiting like a random island in the Galapagos for us.
Yeah, and looking at the tortoises. Um, I
Yeah.
think it's fun. I think it also could explain the question of why are they kind of careful, because they're only kind of interested in us and like
Mhm.
kind of worried about how we might react. And I think it's positive as opposed to neutral. I guess I want to ask you, why do you think it's positive instead of neutral? And is it just that it suggests that they don't want to eradicate us?
Yeah, it sort of feels like it would be compatible with them welcoming us up to their level of technology someday when we
Mm,
can get there. It just like it feels like a peaceful activity.
mhm.
It feels like less controlling. Like we don't send tour groups to prisons. But I guess people do tour zoos, so that's a fair question to ask. There's you could definitely imagine a version of tourism that's compatible with a little more top-down control, or you could imagine one that's compatible with an optimistic Federation future.
Hmm. All right, let's give it a rating.
4/5.
I think so too. Also, this would leave space for like playfulness too, for like them to like mess with us a little bit, in a benign way.
This is the
It's-
not that special thing we're rating, right? That they're
Yeah,
they're mildly curious.
mildly
Um,
curious, but we're ultimately not that special. I think it
yeah,
also implies that there's like a lot of life out there, and there are probably other planets that they're going to.
yes, and that's another. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, that just implies like a level of stability that it implies that civilizations are able to get past the great filter, and all of that to me is very, very hopeful.
Yes, totally. That's super optimistic. And also, I would say, as evidence in this column, we just probably aren't that special, and continually through human history, we have found more ways in which we're not that special.
Yeah.
It's intuitively very believable that we would ultimately find out that we're just not that interesting, that we're just one of bazillions of life forms that are kind of like us and planets that are like us, like
Yeah.
ours. So that I think all goes in this column of it being totally believable that they're just like kind of curious, but not that interested or worried about controlling us necessarily.
Yeah.
Especially because they have such a long runway before we get technologically serious. Like it's probably at least a couple hundred years before we could like meaningfully stage any sort of resistance to
I
this.
don't know. We could blow the entire planet up with nuclear weapons if we wanted to.
We could destroy ourselves, yeah, but the chances are really good that there are lots of other planets like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Cool.
so last one.
Take us home.
Okay, I think it's suitable that this is the end. I'll sum it up with a thumbnail idea of like techno angels. This idea is like higher beings are spiritually literal; they're like actually real, and there are entities like angels and some kind of unifying positive force, maybe a god or gods of some kind, like a benevolent energy that suffuses the universe with hope and love and kindness and unity and
Yeah.
joy.
Let me get some of that. Let me get some of that.
Hit me with that loosh.
Yeah. I just on the record, I really hate that word. I thought that word is icky and weird to me.
Not a great word.
I don't like it. What the fuck?
I
Loose?
agree. Let's stop saying it.
We need a new word for that. Somebody needs to come up with one.
It's enough. It sounds excretory, shall we say.
Yeah.
Okay, so techno angels. Some people have made the argument, and I think it pops up in that Encounter series, that like literal descriptions of angels in the Bible are like rotating discs with eyes or something. That like they're not this like wing idea with halos. We made that up, and this concept kind of emerges from both ufology and more spiritual paths. If you get into reading people who are like really into psychic energies and like connecting to worlds beyond those immediately physically obvious to us, a lot of people say there really are entities of like a higher intelligence and maybe like a higher benevolence than humans. DMT is another route that people are taking into this, and DMT is probably the one that's like most likely to bear scientific fruit soon. Did you hear about this experiment somebody's doing recently where they can like titrate it enough to give people like 45 minutes of DMT experience?
Wow.
This is somebody in a lab is doing this, which is unusual. Like DMT experiences are generally like a couple of minutes, I think, maybe 15.
Yeah, right. It's a short one.
Yeah.
Huh.
But
Jesus,
there are
like go longer under DMT. Good God.
Yeah, I know it does sound kind of scary. Well, we'll put this link somewhere, but there are some people who have been doing experiments and finding that people who go into DMT states tend to report experiencing interactions with similar entities. So this is like kind of the beginning of another avenue of investigation, and maybe we'll talk about it more other times. But it's possible that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy, and that maybe some of those things include angels and or gods. So this obviously would be a good case scenario because it would suggest that there's like a higher divine order to the universe, which exists in like a beautiful and loving way. That never seemed super likely to me growing up. I've always been kind of like an atheist and agnostic at the best. But I got to say, I really like this idea and would like for it to be true. The idea of a god to me at this point in my evolution seems more likely to be like a super AI, but it could also be intertwined with just like the shape of the universe, and like maybe the material properties of the universe emerge from its shape and are fundamentally good. Any of this bounce interestingly for you?
I mean, I guess no. I don't really have any lightning bolts to add here. Yeah, seems like a good case scenario, I guess. So what, the Bible's real, I guess, kind of thing, or just like all religions are real. That,
or they're getting at some aspect of the truth. And the important thing here is that as you go up the chain of consciousness, these beings get both more powerful and more benevolent.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's very hopeful.
Yeah, super optimistic. So how do we square it, I guess, with what we're seeing? Some people think that there's like a UFO angel connection. Other people have hypothesized, and you and I have talked privately about this idea that maybe the technological aspect of UFOs is a real thing, and that we're looking at real beings from real places, but maybe they have a better handle on the spirit world and whatever the next like layers of consciousness are or might be. So like if angels are real, maybe they're not the same thing as non-human intelligences, but maybe some of these non-human intelligences are more able to interact with these like higher dimensional beings, and know more about the landscape of that aspect of reality. I guess honestly, as much as I would love this to be true, I don't feel like it's an obviously true kind of thing. I'm stuck at like a 3 or maybe a 4.
Really?
But maybe it could be as low as 2. I don't know, somewhere in this middle range. Doesn't seem super obvious, for the same reason that like God doesn't seem like a slam dunk as a concept, that like bad things happen in the world. So like, aliens do, or UFOs do scary stuff sometimes, and that doesn't seem to imply that they're working for a higher benevolent order always, anyway.
It feels too tidy to me, I think, for me to give it a 4.
Yeah. I see that.
Yeah.
A little more like manufactured intellectually, philosophically, cosmically than the way we actually observe nature.
I also don't see that it's necessary to explain the phenomena, you know? Like,
Yeah,
it seems like the fact that the idea that there's just like a bunch uh, of rational actors, whether we understand their motives or not, bouncing around and bouncing off each other feels more supported to me than this idea that that there's some hierarchy that all these things are a part of. I don't know,
yeah.
man. I mean, we're fully in this territory of being so hard to assign a likelihood quotient to this.
Closest thing to a report slash evidence comes from that Danny Sheehan description of an interview that some government agents did with an NHI, and they asked him where he was from, and this being said, I'm from a group that is like here to monitor your emergence as a civilization, and we work for what you would call a god, but it's different than that. So
Oh
that
yeah,
kind of points to some like automated higher intelligence. Doesn't
yeah,
necessarily imply that like the universe is suffused with love and light, but
yeah.
it maybe suggests that there are like organizations that report to benevolent entities.
Okay, all right. I mean, I'm leaning two here, I guess.
Let's say let's say two for the tidy version, and maybe three for the messier version where there are like entities, but not necessarily one super god.
Okay.
Oh my god, this has
Eh,
been so freaking crazy. Okay, do you want to like take a breath and step back and see if this has taken you anywhere,
yeah,
moved you in any directions? I'm looking at a lot of sort of shrug type numbers. We've got like a lot of twos
yeah,
and threes all
yeah.
the way through here. We kind of like come down a little bit more toward the four side for slightly more benevolent explanations, like if they are slowly invading, they might just be here to experience it, or if they are doing tourism, they might just be kind of curious but not that interested in
Mhm,
us.
mhm.
Those things kind of like topped our list for most believable.
Okay. You know what I'm thinking about is what my position I think was before I started digging into this stuff. Like just as I was starting to dig into this was like the fact that we haven't been eradicated
Mm,
strongly suggests that we're in a good case scenario here. Whether that's, a very nice zoo or the Galactic Federation that we're going to get invited to join. I was kind of in a place of thinking that no news is good news, basically.
mm, mm-hmm,
Um, but digging into it more, I think that it is more complicated than that, and that like when you take into account the difference in time scales that other entities might experience, or our total inability to presume moral structures within these groups, these entities, um, makes me, I don't know. I guess I'm more freaked out now than I was when I was early in my journey here.
mm. Yeah, it definitely to me seems more likely that they could be doing some freaky things now, but it doesn't necessarily seem more likely to me that they are. Like when I
Yeah,
glance at our numbers, this feels like it tilts positive to me.
yeah.
Um, but I would say the thing that spooks me out the most is this idea that they could be living among us and reporting to some higher organization that is non-human and has non-human agendas.
Hmm.
The version where they're living among us and just like living among us because that's fun seems pretty benign to me and positive. Like, come on in, the water's fine, and like
Yeah.
I'm generally pro-immigration, even if it's Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I think this was like a really awesome, wild, woolly walk.
Good
Um,
for us. This shit's nuts, dude.
Good
It's
for us.
don't put this on the internet. I got, you know.
Yeah, it's too late, but you should probably stop watching if you were watching. Just kidding. Do you have one button? Did you have a thing that you wanted to?
Man, I guess not. I guess I got. I mean, all I have is this new book that I got that I haven't started yet. But I'm excited to read. Unbelievable by Stacey Horn. It's about the Duke Parapsychology Lab, and it's like stories and studies from the Duke Parapsychology Lab. So I don't know. I'm excited to read that.
Cool. I guess maybe as a companion to that, something that informed my views on this is that I've been reading more stuff about psychic interactions with the world, and I would point to a book that we both looked at, Real Magic by Dean Radin, which like a lot of the best works here starts from like a super academic angle and talks about studies that we've done. And I would just say, like, probably anybody who's watched this whole thing already feels this already, but there's like more evidence than I previously would have expected in this arena to suggest that there are some deeper aspects to consciousness, and that we don't understand reality as deeply as we sort of intuitively feel we do. And that's not just from a like faster than light technological travel avenue. It's also from a like consciousness angle, and like what the fundamental matter of the universe might be, and how that relates to what it feels like to be alive.
Well
Wow.
said.
Yeah.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you. Staggered to the end of it.
Okay, weird, wild stuff.
Yeah, maybe we'll do something a little more concrete next time. But thank you for coming with us on this zany journey. And we may return to it over time as we learn more, get more evidence. Maybe if we're still going in a year, maybe we revisit this and see if any of our likelihood estimations have changed.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, John. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.